Welcome back to Hometown Friends, where we explore our most foundational friendships. My name is Chandler Hoffman, and I'm the host of this podcast. In this episode, I had the privilege to interview two women who really appreciate this topic, Emily Nathan and Alexandra Sovin. These women met in third grade, but had different social circles in middle school and high school. After returning to the Bay Area in adulthood, these women reconnected and experienced a hometown friend phenomenon of immediate trust and comfort that led to an instant feeling of connection and an effortless friendship. In this interview, both women share their experience of growing up in the Bay Area in the 1970s and 80s, which shaped their friendships and their sense of belonging to an ethnically diverse environment. These women helped me articulate the different seasons of hometown friendships, like those that were significant long ago, that helped shape their lives. And they share this appreciation that they feel for the deep-rooted, long-standing connections, as well as the current and active ones that they have that give them a profound sense of community. Alex and Emily are extremely thoughtful about how they show up for each other, and they have so much gratitude for the ways that they have been supported by their hometown friends. I think you'll appreciate these women's thoughtfulness and the stories of how they created an identity with these friends that provided them with a secure sense of self and loyalty, which remains to this day. I have so much affection for these women, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Welcome to the Hometown Friends podcast. Tell us about your friendship.
Do you want to start, or
you can start?
Okay. So, we've been talking about this too, because we have a very different dynamic than your previous guests.
Okay.
We met in the third grade at John Muir in Miss Bussey's class.
Mm-hmm.
And
no, I was in Miss Olson's class.
You were in Miss Olson.
Yeah.
I was in Miss Bussey, which is weird that we met, which means we met on the playground.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we even came together. Do you remember any of that? No. But we became good friends. I was a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
I would walk home down Claremont to Pine Avenue by myself. And were you living?
I walked all the way down Claremont to Shafter in Oakland.
Yeah, you were living, I was going to say you were living in Oakland.
Yep.
And then, so we were at a time in Berkeley where kindergarten, first, second, and third was at John Muir.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth, fifth, and sixth were at Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
Seventh and eighth, and in your class, ninth was at West Campus.
Right.
But seventh, eighth, and ninth, seventh and eighth at Willard, then ninth through 12th at Berkeley High. Literally, by the time we get to Malcolm X, so now only 1 year later, fourth grade, we're in different classes, mm-hmm. and we have different crews.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we didn't ever hang out really that much at all.
No. We knew each other, but we didn't really hang out.
And we knew each other because I'd been to her house in the third grade.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been to my house. We'd had, hung out, play days. I don't even think they were called that back then.
No.
But then we had very different crews, but those crews crossed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we weren't hanging out in high school, but we had very similar friends.
Yeah.
And we reconnected at John Muir, so full circle.
Wow.
And Emily was what?
I was the after-school program coordinator. So I ran the after-school program at John Muir. And it must have been my first or second year. And Alex came with her because Masaya was in kindergarten.
Masaya was in kindergarten.
Mari was in third grade. It was my first year at John Muir.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first day of school, I was like, I'm going to go hang out with Mari. And we hung out at lunch.
Yeah.
So I went and hung out with
my
now
32-year-old.
Yeah.
She was in third grade.
Right.
Wow.
So we
Wait.
at lunch.
So third grade, you guys met each other. You were good friends, like what, third and fourth grade or something like that, until you got to fifth grade or sixth grade?
Just third grade
at John Muir.
Okay. Wow. Say a little bit more, you guys, because this is a phenomenon, right? This is what we do in Berkeley, is that if you live in the town or probably in any hometown and you come back to it and you start raising your kids, you start to see these people that you have known or loosely known or are familiar with. And what does it feel like? Do you remember what it felt like to see someone that familiar and to sort of have that comfort to go up to them right away?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. And I do think, like Alexandra was saying, yes, it was just third grade and then, mutual friends after that. But there is this kind of instant bond and connection that you have, right? So we've had this childhood experience, and there were other folks like Jocelyn, other people whose kids were in the program, like that, we grew up together, and instantly they were okay with me taking care of their kids, right? So I think it's this very wonderful connection because it's instant trust.
Yes.
And especially with our relationship, instant like loyalty and familiarity and comfort, right? Like I could totally be myself. I could be transparent about different challenges or what have you. And that was instant.
Wow. Why do you think that is, you guys? Because I agree with you. That is the phenomenon that we're all living. And yet I'm trying to articulate it. And I think this podcast is part of it. Like, why does that happen?
And my other thought is, why does it happen? And is it something about Berkeley? Mm-hmm. Or because I talk to other people and they don't have friends from their hometown, even though they grew up and went to middle school, elementary school, high school, and they're not friendly with them anymore. How is it that we had 1 year of a connection? We were in the same schools, but not in the same crowds. Coming back to John Muir, where she's the program director, and me being like, oh, thank God she's going to watch my kids. Right. Feel safe. And I think it is that I don't know if it's a Berkeley thing, but it is definitely something about that initial connection, something about that carries forward. And even when I think about like some of my very best friends after meeting Emily, growing up, high school, who I had the craziest experiences with, who I do not talk to at all now, not for any reason, but when I see them or talk to them, it's like nothing has passed. Right. It's like, oh my God, I miss you, I love you, how are you, great, or not even saying that, literally, just picking right back up.
That's the distinguishing quality, yes, of these hometown friends network and experience, is that you pick up where you left off. Trust is right away truly like high, especially if you've had lots of experiences with each other. But you're even arguing that you almost don't need to have these long-term experiences. You just need to be super familiar with each other, and then you drop right into this really high trusting relationship that allows for more vulnerability and a deeper relationship. That kind of blows my mind, you guys. I just don't know how that works and why humans like do that. I think there's a trust issue. There's a familiarity. There's a comfort. There's also a value thing. What about that? Like, you guys come from the same place. You know each other. You know each other's families. You know kind of a little bit of your backgrounds. You also probably can assume that you have certain values that are similar. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it is a value thing. I think we have similarities in the way we think about things. We're both loyal. We both are very sensitive. We could both start. I could start crying right now. We are both like, are we gonna cry?
I'm going to make this.
Yeah, we both definitely cry, and we can do that with each other without feeling weird, or not weird, but
self-conscious.
Yeah, self-conscious or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. Like,
I like the idea of thinking that Berkeley or the Bay Area, we're special and unique. I like the idea of thinking that. I do think Berkeley High, it is unique and special in many, many ways. But I also wonder if it's partly generational, right? Just the time that we all grew up. For a lot of us, I know we were talking like not all of the folks who in our town had the same experience, but for a lot of us, or I feel like our group and extended group, we grew up pretty independent, and our friends were our family, really. I mean, we were growing up and kind of raising each other, right? Like in a single parent home, and
Me
you know,
too.
a lot of us did. I mean, I had one friend actually whose parents were married.
Okay. Wow.
Or, you know, parents were divorced, and you know, we were kind of on our own, right? And like our parents were from that 70s era where they were kind of doing their thing, and we came along or we didn't. So there was a just the role that our friendships played was incredibly significant. And I think having that shared experience also plays a part in that, you know?
I think you're right, Emily. And I think it makes sense that because that some of the independence that we all grew up having, as you said, made it such that I think we did have the different quality of friendship when you saw these people at your school or in the neighborhood. There was a lot more outside activity. So we saw each other in neighborhoods. There was a lot of riding around and walking around and seeing each other at parties.
Yeah.
I know.
Taking the bus,
Yeah.
getting in cars with literally like 15 kids, you know, and
Yeah.
that experience of being with single mothers and mothers who then were like, oh, I'm single now and I'm going to live my life and my kids can take care of themselves, literally. And within our friendships, not necessarily she and I, but our friendships, everyone having their own role within that. Like there was the parent role. There was the role that was the fuck up. There was these different
Like in the friend group.
Yes.
Each friend had a certain role.
Yes.
They often do. Yeah.
Because the parents weren't, you know, it wasn't like, I mean, I didn't have a curfew. I was walking the streets at 2 a.m. I was going to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was going to Dream Fluff. Emily worked at Dream Fluff at 5 a.m. You know, and doing that with friends and feeling safe and having that kind of experience. Then as you get older, you know that you can trust that person or that person understands who you are and kind of what you've experienced.
Yeah. Emily also said something that I asked on the questionnaire, which is, do you have friends that feel more like family? And that's the only question on my survey. And I think I have about 70 participants at this point in terms of who's answered the questionnaire. It's the only question that has 100% rate, which is that every single person has said they have a friend that feels more like family.
Oh,
Sounds like you both have friends that do feel like family, more like family in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, I think of Emily as like, I'm going to cry. I like my family just because we now have a second generation. We have children that went to school together, that went to camp together, that call each other cousins, that, you know, it's carried on. And it, you know, I talk to Emily every day, and I think it's just, and there are other people that I feel like that as well. I mean, and I feel like my sister is also one of my very best friends.
Okay, that's another question.
Every single day, but it doesn't necessarily even feel different than talking to Emily.
Yeah.
Even though there's no blood relation.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you know, we also, you know, one of my experiences with you guys is that we had our kids at the same elementary school.
Yeah.
And in a surrounding, you know, Berkeley is not all the people that we grew up with. Most people on the courtyard at Emerson were not people that we grew up with. Right. But I remember distinctly the first day of school, or the one day that I remember seeing you both, and my kids were going off, and I looked across the courtyard and sort of spied you guys. And I think we both started walking towards each other, just like zombies, almost just like attracted to each other. And we met in the middle of the courtyard, and we just started laughing, and we melted into this like, oh my God, thank God you guys are here. And I felt like, I said this, I think before when I interviewed you guys, I felt like it was an embarrassment of riches. I felt so comfortable, so much of a sense of belonging. And I didn't realize it at the time, that not everybody had that feeling. So I was insulated from this feeling of like, oh, first day of school, this is kind of weird. I don't know anybody. No, I knew you. And it made all the difference in the world to know you guys and to see your faces, and to, like, we were in our hometown. We were putting our kids in school together. It was like no problem. It just was like so easy. And I just don't know that, I don't know what you guys felt about that, or if you remember that time.
100%. I mean, I think we feel so grateful for that. I mean, it was, I can't even, it's even hard to articulate how special that was for my kids to be in school with other friends' kids that we grew up together. And in fact, if I could tell a little story, 3 weeks before my oldest daughter, Bella, started kindergarten, I ran into Jenny Morgan, they named Jenny Sicken. We ran into each other at the farmer's market, and her son, Ben, was also starting kindergarten at Emerson. And I hadn't seen Jenny probably since high school. And similarly, like we didn't hang out necessarily, but we were in the same kind of large group, right? So we knew each other. So we ended up at 3 weeks later at Emerson together, and Ben and Bella ended up in the same kindergarten class. And long story short, they're still best friends to this day. And we are with Jenny all the time. I mean, that's one of my closest friends. So
amazing.
It was instant, right? And similar, I mean, same, Peanut was also in there. He's Alicia and David's, son, who also, they're sweethearts from Berkeley High. So we just marveled in the fact that our three kids were in the same class together. And it was, again, like we keep going back to this instant trust and, comfortability. So
yeah,
it felt so special. And then here at Emerson, I mean, for us to all be there, and then of course with you, Chandler, and it's pretty, it's hard to put words to.
Well,
I agree.
You said something, you said a word, you said insulated. It feels very insulated.
Yeah. And I'm good with that.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
But it's a fascinating thing that happens with hometown friends, at least with the friends that I have in Berkeley. When you have someone else that isn't a hometown friend, that your spouse, a new friend that you've met, that you now invite to your birthday, and all your hometown friends are there, and there's this other person, they can't break into that. It's uncomfortable. You're like, wait, I know all of our spouses have been like, what? You guys are always like together, and it's this thing. And, especially if you don't have a spouse that's from Berkeley,
Right.
I did have the father of the first two children was a Berkeley person that Arthur. And so we have that connection, he and I, but my husband and the father of my three children, he could be fine not participating in the things because he knows it's going to be the Berkeley thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about your spouse, Emily? Because he's not from Berkeley, is he?
No, he's from Boston. Yeah, he's from the East Coast, and I think it's actually kind of sweet because his closest friends are also his high school friends. So in fact, he went to Brookline High, and his tagline is, "I went to the real BHS."
Shout out BHS.
The kids are at Berkeley High too, right? So he really values it, and he gets it, and he absolutely loves my friends, my girlfriends that I grew up with, and has his own actually connection and relationship with them. So
I love that.
It takes time too. I mean, I've been with my husband 27 years. It's not, he's close with Emily and Josh, and he knows all my friends, but it took many, many years to get there.
Yeah.
And for him to understand and see how important these people are to me, and the comfortability of us when we're together, and it just being so natural.
Because it's family.
Yeah.
It's family.
Yeah.
In fact, when I met my husband, Josh, at a party, he told me where he went to school, and he went to NYU. And I said, with my Berkeley-ish kind of attitude, right? Like, oh, well, do you know, Ursi Boynton? And he goes, oh, does she say hella all the time? And I said, oh, yes. Okay. You know her. Okay. I'll talk to you. So we actually went to college with Ursi. So that was like an in when we met.
Oh my God, that must have been an amazing connection, right? Oh, this guy knows my best friend or one of my best friends from high school.
Right. So I'll talk to you.
Total vetted, situation.
Right. Exactly.
It's awesome.
I think I was just thinking going back to the family piece.
Yeah.
That, like you were saying, where if you don't talk, you haven't talked to someone for a long time, but instantly you pick up that so many of these friendships have become family or like our chosen family, as folks say, that even if you haven't seen them like that, you're one of your closest friends, you haven't seen them or talked to them, you're picking up just like you would with a family member. So
right.
I think that is a huge part of the phenomena, that it's almost like, even if we've kind of gone separate ways, you're also kind of stuck with me because of that history. I mean, there's that history and that bond that we're stuck together.
That makes sense. And also, Berkeley is special in a lot of people's eyes. And I think you guys answered my questionnaire that you thought it was special too, and that it made a difference in your life, and you felt like it actually affected the kinds of friendships that you had. Can you guys talk about that a little bit? Growing up in your hometown? What was it like?
I mean, I'll say, so my dad, my roots are on the East Coast and my dad is in Boston. So I spent my winter breaks and summers on the East Coast. So I saw a really intense difference, right, between where I grew up in Berkeley and going to Brookline, Massachusetts, which was right outside of Boston. I think at the time in high school at that time, it was almost confusing because it was such this huge, vast difference, right? So I think.
What were some of the differences, Emily, if you don't mind saying more about what was so different about it? Because I hear you and I've had the same experience, but I want to articulate what was so different. Why was it so vastly different?
I mean, definitely. Well, Berkeley likes to highlight and emphasize the diversity, right? That's a big part of it. I mean, that's the foundation of Berkeley High, right? It was one of the first high schools to voluntarily do busing, and I say likes to say because I mean that's a whole nother podcast. But and so so we really valued that, right? So my family valued that, and the fact that we had all different kind of friends and all of that. And then I would go to this very white, upper middle class Jewish community where the values were really different, and so navigating that was challenging. But at the same time gave me a different kind of appreciation when I came home, right? And I think for a lot of folks, it wasn't till we left that we realized that value, right? The specialness or the uniqueness of Berkeley. And so a lot of us came back.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, I didn't think about it as a town. When you're younger, it's like the city and it's connected to Cal and da-da-da-da. But now, we walk around. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced this where our kids are like, oh no, you're running into someone else. You're going to start talking again. Like, whoa, right? And now that my kids I'm kind of veering off a little bit. Now that my kids gone through Berkeley High, and I'm saying, this is going to start happening to you the rest of your life, right? Like older daughters abroad, and there's already been multiple connections. And I'm like, that's how it's going to be, right? You're going to start to feel that. So
it's the small world effect.
Yes, world effect travels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I didn't have an experience where I spent summers away. I was in Berkeley. I was going to camp. I was, that's what I did at summertime. When I got to Berkeley High, there was very distinct, separate areas.
Yeah, slopes,
there was the slopes, the courtyard, the steps. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and I had friends, over behind the gym even. I'm like, where do I go?
Right.
Where do I fit in? because I don't fit in the way I look at the slopes, even though I have a lot of good friends over there. And I have those friends that are on the steps from K&J, from sports camp, but they're not really my friend. I mean, they're my friends, but, I don't really have the same experience. My parents weren't married. I didn't, go away on vacation every summer, winter, whatever, didn't go skiing, none of those kind of things. And I was like, where do I fit in?
Yeah.
And when I was in elementary school and, John Muir, Malcolm X, middle school, I didn't ever feel that.
Yeah.
I just felt a togetherness. And maybe me being a white person and not understanding the privilege that I had, and maybe someone else that was my friend that was a person of color felt differently. Maybe they felt differently, but I didn't. I just felt like these were my friends.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, given that we only have one high school in Berkeley High, and we all feed into this one high school, and you just said, Alex, it's like the first time you ever recognized that there were differences between the cultures or the races or the ethnicities that we were. In fact, we stratified ourselves likely when we got to the high school. And I've said this before, and I don't know if you had the same experience, but it was so mixed. And then it just every single year, it seemed to get less and less, more and more stratified, more and more homogenous in these groups. And I think that's just developmental theory. I think people just start to see that, similarities and differences more when you get older and older. And then there's more pressure or more, I don't know, expectation that you'll hang out with people that look kind of like you. And I think that familiarity seems to make a difference. But what do you guys think about sort of how that worked? And what was your experience of growing up in Berkeley? And there might have been a loss too, because that sounds like it was a little bit of a loss for you, Alex, to sort of realize, you can't just hang out with everybody. It's not just all kumbaya anymore.
I mean, I think back then there's no way that I would ever say a loss. Like I wouldn't, when I was in it, I was more like, this is, I guess I need to figure out. And my space was in between the steps, like on the little round part right here of the bricks and the A building, right there.
Yeah.
But looking back, I don't even know if I would say a loss, but it was something. It was something that I thought about. When in that time, I actually was like, this is very interesting that everyone is separate now. Like, how come we're not all together anymore?
Yeah.
And I think it did, the earlier life did impact the way I looked at the world and the way that I wanted to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
How so?
Definitely.
Just to be aware that there are differences, but similarities, and that the feeling, I don't know, I think it's, especially in my line of work, I'm a social worker, and I feel like, when I go into a patient's room, I'm in a hospital, I've been in hospitals for 25 years, it's just feeling at ease with people that don't necessarily look like me or don't have the same background as me. And the assumption when I walk in is, this person is a social worker with this degree who's white and she's not going to get it. And then I can have a conversation and put that person more at ease, right? But, I think that gave me, that growing up without knowing it, gave me that ability to kind of look at the world differently and, understand the injustices and just live a life that I'm aware of things that some people that grew up in different areas aren't aware of.
Yeah. Well, it was not only, I think if we had a diverse group of friends, then we got a chance to talk about that. We also got it as an education, sort of an academic subject matter in Berkeley High. We were encouraged to talk about race. We were encouraged to talk about class. We were encouraged to talk about our culture. And, as a psychologist, I know we often have, quick assumptions about what people look like and what we think they're all about. And I actually hope that this podcast does a little bit of different. It actually gives people an opportunity to tell their story that could be very unique and also could be universal, because you're not the only people that were, growing up in Berkeley, and you certainly weren't the only people with, single moms or that were heavily influenced by the Black community. I don't know. What do you think, Emily? You and I had a seminal experience in my life of doing an equity circle when we were older, and our kids were going to Emerson, and I learned so much and had a great opportunity to hear from people of color mostly about what it felt like to come into a school and to feel unwelcome and to feel the microaggressions and to feel like they didn't belong. And it was so moving to me to be a part of the solution, truthfully, to help create a more welcoming environment. And I think we're actually pretty successful about it in a lot of ways. And I think I have told you this. What I learned is just to open my mouth and be super welcoming to anybody, everybody. Mm-hmm. That was part of my plan, is to be the change, to be the one that says hello. And that's the biggest thing I took away from that circle.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I'm curious about your experience of growing up in Berkeley, why you like Berkeley, and then that equity circle is really moving.
Also, I think you should tell your story of college.
Yeah.
And your experience, because we both have very different college experiences.
Yeah.
So
tell us, Em.
I think at Berkeley High, when I think back, I was kind of in a bubble a little bit and naive. I mean, I definitely saw how segregated it was to some degree, and then had some pride that I could kind of navigate through, right? And like we were saying, kind of hang out at different spots. I had a pretty mixed group of friends, but a lot of that was part of, when I was in high school, I lived in that neighborhood, and I hung out with, Danielle and Onika. We were all in the same neighborhood, and I definitely felt some differences and insecurities, like the kids in the north side, and I could feel that growing up. And so I think I definitely went through my stages of trying to figure that out and unpack that, and there were times of, I think, being accused of being something that I wasn't, or trying to be something that I wasn't, which was fine. Again, that's high school, kind of navigating it through. And then, but in general, just it was a really good time. I mean, it was mostly just really fun.
Yeah.
When I think back of Berkeley High, it was just lighter, I mean, that's why I, to some degree, feel like I was in a bubble, because I didn't see or feel all of those tensions or hardships around me,
Wow.
And then when I went to college, when I went to San Jose State, I was kind of stuck of like, where do I fit in here, and who am I going to hang out with?
Right.
Back to the hometown friends, like the two people I knew was Adam Clark and this other kid, Jimmy, and they like instantly were like, oh, we got you, Emily, and I wasn't super close to Adam Clark, but he like had my back instantly. Right.
Wow.
And so, and then across the hall from me were two women, one, Nichelle, and her roommate, Dusty, and Dusty joined a white sorority and Nichelle joined a Black sorority. And I became best friends with Nichelle. She's my son's godmother.
Wow.
So I ended up joining a Black sorority my sophomore year in college. And so that was my entire world. I mean, wow. I was completely immersed in the Black community at San Jose State. And it was, again, hella fun. And it was all dancing. All the parties were dancing. And I, again, kind of naive in a bubble, felt very strong in my stance that I wasn't trying to be anything other than myself, a white Jewish woman. But this is where I felt connected. And that came from my experiences growing up.
Yeah, that says a lot, Emily. I mean, that's got to be a unique situation, right?
At that time, for sure. And that's also when people were really pledging back then. So, but, so anyway, and my best friends going into before I pledged are the same best friends that I have now from college. So those are lifelong friends.
Yeah. Amazing.
And so, then after college, continuing to navigate that through, of course. But we talk about my daughter, my children, they have a completely different perspective about that. My daughter was like, Mommy, you were culturally appropriating, right? And I really had to, first of all, I love that we can have those open conversations, but I really had to reflect on that. And I've talked to some of my friends about that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And it just really, I appreciate that, but it just wasn't my experience at that time. I think mostly because I was invited in. Like they asked me to pledge and be a part of their organization. And my reasoning for wanting to be a part of the organization was wanting to be a part of a group of women that did community service and were active, and we were stepping, and it was a whole social scene, right? So I didn't think about it like that, but I get that too. Like I could see that.
Totally.
Don't know today if I would do that same thing,
Right.
But I guess that confidence came, also from those connections growing up, right? And it was just, it was just so fun. It was just fun and lifelong, connections and relationships.
But that's what we do with our friends, right? We have fun. And then, of course, when we're friends with them longer and when we get into adulthood, it's not all fun and games anymore because we actually start to have pain and suffering.
And so, I think then, as I became adult and my, kids are going to school, you are learning more and becoming wiser and taking a step back, and back to your question about what's that importance for you. And I think, talking about valuing having a diverse group of people is great, but living that is another thing, right? So that's a really conscious, intentional choice. And so when we were at Emerson, right, having that similar background experience, I love Emerson. My kids had an amazing experience there. They felt loved and cared for, but my friend next to me was having a different experience. And I didn't feel okay with that, right? Tyrion also was there, and she had this catchphrase of, I love this school enough to challenge the things that I don't love about it. And so we chose to kind of take that on. And I think the other piece to that is I went from being a child in the Berkeley school districts and the Berkeley Unified School District growing up. And then I went to being an employee for the district and then a parent. And I saw the different windows open that I didn't know that were there, which is why I kind of think about me being naive and in this bubble, right? Like as I became an employee and I started hearing these different things that parents were saying, I was like, whoa, that is not what I thought. That's not the shield that's blasted out there about this city, right?
Right.
And then similarly as a parent. So it felt, I don't know if my duty is the right way to say it, but it felt like my responsibility to take a step back and really lean in on that, right? And that went back to with the equity circles you're speaking of is, as a parent, what is my role in that? Like, I'm not working at the school, so what's my role? And I saw that my role in that was to work on creating a more welcoming community for all families. And so we did some work, Chandler, and I called on you, and you came through right away.
I think we spent 3 or 4 months together, like on a weekly basis, monthly basis.
Yep.
And we got facilitation. It was a profound experience in my adult life, but it did harken back to my experience of growing up in Berkeley and being in a multicultural, exposed place. And also, I'll just be honest, I preferred it. like I had the same experience. I didn't join a black fraternity, but when I went back to Maryland, I was the Maryland Terrapin, which is the mascot.
That's awesome.
And the other Terrapin, we had two of us so that we could, split up the duties. He was a black guy from Ellicott County or Ellicott City. And all the people in my dorms were white, but this guy was black, and he would take me to his parties. And they were called smokers. And I never knew that kind of party. And they would step and they would dance and they would, look at me as I walked in. I was the only white dude there. But that wasn't an experience that I had those experiences before. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like too far out of the range. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about your guys' experience through both Berkeley, but also past Berkeley High.
I think also, just about that. First of all, the equity circle, I think, is so Berkeley in that where else would you have an equity circle? Where people actually can address the issues that other people are feeling, right? That they have the space to do that. And how incredible that is, because there's so many places that you don't have the opportunity to be vulnerable or say, it feels like shit, or these, microaggressions, or I'm not comfortable here. You think it's great here, and I think it fucking sucks here, right?
Totally.
And yep. I think like that feeling of growing up and feeling like I was a part of something and I didn't know what it was. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm different, or even though I was the only white kid at these birthday parties, I wasn't thinking that at the time, right? Looking back, I'm thinking it. But then as I grew up, I wanted to continue to be in that community. And I wasn't always accepted. And an example of that was at UC Berkeley. Yeah. I was going to be an African American Studies major. And I declared that major, and I was not accepted in those classes. And I was told many times, you are taking the space from someone that's a black person that wants to be in here. And I was like, damn, shit, I can't be this major. Like, what the fuck? Like, I want to be, it's not right. But I had to think about that. Going in, I didn't even think about that. And then being in Berkeley, I got the opportunity to do this group. And it was a group of women. It was an 8-week meeting once a week. And as a white woman, I had to bring another woman that was a woman of color. And we would talk about our shared experiences and then the differences of how it is when we walk through the world and how people look at us. And at the end of that group, each white woman had to make a commitment to these women of color of what we would do as white women with a voice different than, even though we were all women, and women often are treated differently than men, but women of color are treated even more differently. And so I remember saying that my commitment would be to always say, to stand up, to use my voice. And I remember thinking as a kid, being that person already, but I wasn't thinking that during that time. I didn't think I was standing up, or I didn't think I was saying, like, why are you talking to that person that way? Or why at Sweet Dreams are you following my friend? Like, what is happening here? I would say those things, but I didn't know I was actually saying something because I had a voice to say something. But then having that opportunity to say it out loud and to say, this is what I'm going to commit to, and I don't know if it's going to do anything or have any effect on other people, but I have to do that because I can, or I feel like I can. And I think because of my upbringing, where I grew up, the friends that I had allowed me to feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, that's
without being the white savior. It wasn't like, I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to say, what's happening here? Like, let's look at what is happening. This is not okay.
Yeah, to use your privilege in a way that actually brings to light the injustices. That's a way to use privilege, actually, as a white person. You actually have a lot of power in that to actually stand up and say, this is not right, or let's listen to other people's voices. Yeah. That is part of the privilege, actually. It influences a larger, wider community. Yeah. I'm wondering, tell me about some of the other friends that you guys hung out with in Berkeley, and tell us, are you guys still connected to other friendships that you formed early on or from Berkeley High?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, really. So as I was saying, I have my two very best friends in high school were Megan and Christiane. We were the MAC, the Max. I even have a rap that we made in Malcolm X.
Oh, do it.
Oh my God.
Give us a little bit.
Bright red, but I will do it.
Awesome.
These are the 80s and we drive Mercedes. We are polite, so come spend the night. We'll treat you good, we'll treat you fine, so come on all and spend some time. We're the MAC, that's who we be. Megan, Alex, Christiane.
Nice. That's awesome, Alex.
Those two women were girls at the time, were my very best friends, and we experienced craziness together. Like, traveling the world and having our parents go away for weeks at a time and leave some money on the table and be like, you'll be fine. And going in between these houses and partying and our, guys and all of that, and just having, I told you that story, my Prince story about with Megan. And
do tell that story again on air.
1985, Purple Rain concert.
Yes.
And Megan and I loved Prince, as awesome. Many of us did.
Hell yeah.
That, Purple Rain era. And we wanted to get tickets, but we couldn't. They sold out. There was a concert at the Cow Palace. Okay. Remember, at this time, there's no phones, there's no pagers, there's nothing. So we decide we're going to go try to scalp tickets. Okay, that we knew about scalping. So we get dressed up in purple capes and lace, and we go to the city. Megan's mom drops us off. Okay, what parent drops off these kids in San Francisco wearing lace and high heels and purple capes? But she did, and we each had money, and we're walking around and up and down that street where the Cow Palace is, and no one's scalping their tickets to the Prince concert, right? But there are these guys that are scalping, and they come up to us and they're like, we have tickets, but they're not seated together. And we're like, nah, we're cool. We're going to find some together. We don't end up finding any. The show's going to start. Sheila E.'s about to go on. So we see those guys and we're like, do you guys still have the tickets? They're like, yeah, but come across the big boulevard. So we're like, okay, sure. We go across the boulevard and the guy was like, where's the money? And I said, where's the ticket? And I was holding the money like this. And I was like, well, where are the tickets? And he went into his pants like he was going to pull out the tickets. And his friend came behind and grabbed the money. And they ran. And me and Megan started running after them. And then we looked at each other and we were like, what are we going to do if we catch them? Like, what are we doing? So I was like, oh, hell no. We are going to this concert, right? I was so upset. So I see this police officer, and this is a very true story. There's nothing made up about this. I see this police officer, and I was like, Megan, just follow my lead, basically, right? So I go up to the police officer, and I can kind of cry at the drop of a dime, and I was like, excuse me, officer, do you have a dime so I can call my mom? At the payphone, it was a dime. And he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, we just got our tickets stolen. And he was like, you got your tickets stolen or you got some money stolen? I was like, no, we got our tickets stolen. And I'm like, Prince is our life. Like, Prince. Get in the back of the patrol car. I'm going to take a report. So we get in the car and I'm like pretending to cry and I'm hitting Megan and Megan's like, yeah, Prince, we love Prince. He's like, don't worry. Just don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And he ends up taking us to the front of security and takes us right into the concert. And we end up seeing Prince. But
nice.
those experiences that we had, right?
That's great.
You know, but I don't talk to Megan and Christiane. Barely ever.
Wow. And then, of course, when you get back together with Christiane, with MAC,
it's nothing. I mean, it's like no time has passed.
You saw me.
Yeah.
To see Maxwell.
Yeah. The experiences we had, and then seeing them now, even if so much time has passed, is like no time's passed at all.
The love is really strong, isn't it? I mean, it really is powerful. The connection that we feel to these people that are so seminal to our existence, to that, you know, foundational to our early childhood experiences, but our adolescent experiences, super intense. Like, you know, being in a dangerous situation like what you guys were in, making it through and surviving and having a story to tell. You know, it's a great story. You got in, worked out great, and it was risky. You know, you were out there in the big wide world and you had each other and you were in lace.
And purple.
Yeah. You know, it's an amazing scene because when you move through life, you got to have your, you know, they say it, you got to have your ride or die. You got to have your person, right? What about for you, Emily? What about your friendships in high school and the people that you still keep in touch with from your hometown?
Well, I can't wait to share that. But before I do, I have to share my favorite Chandler story, actually.
Oh, nice. You got one for me. I like it.
It's sweet, but I love it. So my oldest memory of you, Chandler, and I've shared this with you before, was at Malcolm X. And I was in 4th grade. You were in 6th grade. And I moved around a lot. So at the time, I lived near you, and we took the bus to Malcolm X. And I would go to the back row, and you would be back there reading the, the exciting parts of Forever.
Judy Blume.
So Judy Blume. You would read the about Ralph.
Page 72.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
So it was like, go to the back of the bus and hear Chandler read
the 23 or the 7 or whatever bus
no,
we were
it was
on.
a school bus.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They
would take the bus. Yeah. And
Miss Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading Judy Blume out loud. Was I actually reading out loud?
Yes.
Whoa.
But
I totally don't remember that.
Remember that one?
Say again.
The Forever. Do you remember that one?
I remember that book, but I don't remember reading it out loud. How did you feel about that? Like this 6th grader was reading something out loud. Was that cool, or was that like geeky?
It was so cool.
Awesome.
It was so cool because it was a 6th grader and it was Forever. It was like, the dirty, sexy parts, you know?
Totally. So, I was a horny little kid, like a lot of us.
I guess I was too, because I was right there listening. Anyway, so I love that.
That's great.
So in 10th grade, Ursi, Jill, and I decided that we were going to be best friends. And I had, known Ursi from 3rd grade, but, elementary school, and Jill I met at Willard. And so we decided we were going to be best friends, and we were the digital displays.
Love it.
I was Dig E. There was Dig J and Dig U, of course. And we, back then, used to write notes in class. Remember, we'd write these long notes and we always signed Dig E, Dig J.
Love it. Oh, that's awesome. It's very important, I think, to the human condition to create identity and be identified with other people who are like us, that we want to represent them.
Yeah.
And it starts in these little small groups, but it also goes wider, right? You start maybe in your family, then you start with these, friends groups, and then the larger community, like being from Berkeley, or being from the Bay, or being from California, or being from America. I mean, it can go on, being from the world. I hope, that we're all sort of identifying, but identification means something. And I think it's because we get a sense of belonging, right? From that identification. What do you guys think?
So I appreciate you saying that, because you don't think about that at the time, right? I mean, now and I'm still to this day, I'm still with Ursi and Jill. Those are my girls,
Nice.
And we never swayed from that through the years. But at the time you don't think about it like that, but now when we reflect back, one of the things that we really appreciated about that is once we were like, okay, so we're best friends, this is a crew, we still hung out with other people, right? Like we would hang out with other people, but I think we felt we had more confidence. In high school, the confidence, that's right, it's so hard. I mean, it's so up and down. But that really supported that confidence because we could go do, our different boyfriends or whatever, because we knew that was solid. And so that was a really amazing base, that I think we all appreciated. And then throughout the years, like I said, my family was on the East Coast and Ursi went to school in New York. So she's one of my few friends who knew my whole family. She knows my dad's side, my sister, knew my sister on the East Coast got married. Ursi was at those weddings,
Wow.
You guys were camp counselors together.
That's right. And so and during the summer in college, I worked at an overnight camp in New Hampshire. And because my younger sisters from my dad were going to camp and it was a way for me to be with them. And in fact, my first year, I got hired over the phone and he said, hey, that we want to offer you the job. And I said, okay, but I'll only come if you hire my best friend too.
Oh, wow.
So then they hired Ursi also. So then we went and we were badass in New Hampshire. Like we were the coolest. You could not touch us, right?
I mean, that must be amazing to be in a different environment with someone who you trust so much and you have identification with. It's like doubling yourself in some way.
Yeah.
It does create a lot of confidence to have one person to help you navigate an unfamiliar space, unfamiliar places.
Well, so when I finished, when I graduated from San Jose State, I actually went to DC. I had done a semester program there where my daughter's in school now, actually. And so I was in DC for a year, waitressing and, living that fun young life.
Nice.
And then I went and lived in Boston for 3 years because I had never lived in the same city as my dad. And kind of going back to that same conversation, when I moved to Boston, I was like, where am I supposed to live in Boston? Right. Because their neighborhoods are segregated,
Yes.
So that was interesting. I ended up in the North End in the Italian neighborhood. And then after that, I was like ready to come home and I came back home to go to grad school, moved back in with my mom and was like, okay, going back home now. So
nice.
I was appreciated that time, for sure, be on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But it made me realize, appreciate the things I didn't know to appreciate. And like, there's just no place like home. I also wanted to live near my mom.
Nice.
I wanted to have my family there whenever that was to happen. So,
yeah. What about you, Alex?
Well, how
was it leaving Berkeley and going on?
I had a different experience because at UC Berkeley, I had my daughter and I lived in the family village and I was the first one of my friends to have a child. And so people didn't really know how to act or not act, but like they would be like, well, I didn't call you, invite you because you have a kid or,
right.
Wait, what? Same thing when my kid died. I was the first person whose parent died. And so people didn't, after the initial, I'm sorry, no one ever talked about it again.
Wow.
While I'm like grieving because he was standing and dropped dead. So it was such a huge, huge loss. And it was so strange because no one had experienced that. Anyways, back to my growing up. And so then I decided that I wanted to go to school. I had this full circle. I graduated at Berkeley with a BA in social welfare. And I hated that program. It was not what I thought social work was at all. It was all about theory and policy and procedures. And there's no like practicums or anything like that. And so I was like, this is not what I want to do. And I went through all these things that ended up that I was doing social work. I worked for AmeriCorps when it first started for 2 years and was doing social work in school. So I was like, I want to go to graduate school and get my master's in social work. And at that time, the U.S. News and Report, how they have like the graduate schools, and San Francisco State was like, there was a tier for San Francisco State that it was one of the good social work programs. And in that tier was the University of Hawaii. I loved Hawaii. Hawaii, first of all, Megan her father's from Hawaii. And so she moved there for 7th and 8th grade, I believe. And I went to visit her, me and Ryan Taylor, who was Ian's best friend. We would go and stay with the Anabas and just go to the beach. Megan and I would go for 4 days for the weekend. So I knew Hawaii. I loved Hawaii. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Hawaii. And I got in and I took my 2 children, ages 3 and 5, by myself to Hawaii with this whole fantasy that I was going to meet other parents in this master's program. I was the only parent. In Hawaii, nobody needs to kind of parent share because everyone has huge extended families.
Right.
So I had to take Mariela Maceo to classes with me on Tuesday and Thursday night. Luckily, it was social work school and the professor would allow that until I found a undergrad at the dorms that could watch the children. So while I was there, I was thinking like, this is so hard and I have to get back home. I have to get back home. I need to get the kids. They're going to need to be with their dad back at home. Arthur and I weren't together and I was already together with Damien, my husband now. But there was never a thought that even though I loved Hawaii and that's my place, I never ever thought that I wouldn't come back to Berkeley.
Yeah.
Like it just was part of the natural progression of what my life was going to be. I was going to be at Berkeley, and not all of my kids feel like that, but some of them do. Some of them, and like Dominic for sure. Berkeley, Europe is where he wants to be in life. Literally, it's Europe or Berkeley. You know, and he knows that. The same way that I just knew I wanted to be with my sister who lives in Berkeley, my mother who lives in the house that I grew up in, you know, the friends that also were back here. I knew that I could come back and just have friends. I think on the questionnaire, it's like, do you need more friends or I don't.
Would you like more friends? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I in my life growing up, I have a lot of friends at work and stuff, but not friend. You know, I have one friend from work or a few friends from work, but none that really are the same as my hometown friends.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I did ask that question. Like, are these friendships different, and why are they different, and what makes them different if they are? Because first of all, friends are good any way they come, right? I mean, listen, friendships are powerful. I mean, the only reason I'm doing a podcast on hometown friends is because I do think there's a qualitative difference here. And I wonder if you guys think that too. And if you do, let's talk about what makes them different. Why are they different? And what does it feel like to be around them and to enjoy them and to participate in them? You guys said some things on your questionnaire about loyalty, about vulnerability, about comfort, about dropping into a deep sense of connection right away.
I think,
oh my God, Megan Anaba is calling me right now. I just numbered her up. I'm kidding you. I don't talk to Megan. That's awesome. Crazy.
That's awesome.
Tell her you're on a podcast and you can't answer the phone.
That can't be a short conversation. Well, I think there's definitely different answers for that. But the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, I think, and I don't know if this is more for women or just me, but I'll say growing up, dealing with like insecurities or confidence for me was one of my challenges growing up. And I think about that a lot with my own children in terms of intentionality. And with these friendships, there's no insecurities. Like I don't think about like, oh, should I not have said that? Or did they take that the wrong way? Or dang, I don't look like I text, Alex was like, hey, can I wear pajama bottoms tonight? I mean, it's just like, I just don't have those concerns or insecurities. Right. And I have some other good friends who, I've only been friends with like 10, 12 years, right? They're like newer friends. And, let's say even recently, like if I don't talk to them for a while or like something happened with the kids, like I'll second guess it. And I just don't have those worries, right? If I call Alexandra or Ursi or Jill or Jennifer or Jenny, there's none of that insecurity is there. Like, and if I haven't talked, it's like, well, why haven't you called me? It's not like, oh, should I ask that? And there's also this comfort level in being transparent about, like, things that are coming up in my marriage or things that have come up with my kids that I'm trying to navigate, right? Like, learning how to parent a teenager, I need to figure that out. And I often need to figure that out with another mom. Like Josh and I mean, that's my road dog, my number one, and we can talk about a lot of things, but he's not a mom. And he just sees the world differently in some ways, right? So being able to do that with someone, not only who is a mom and very experienced and wise, but also has had a similar background, right? Because we all bring our own lived experience to everything we do, including parenting. And that's significant, right? And we also talk a lot about how, all of our kids know each other and they're being raised with this chosen family to some degree, right? And, we talk about how, like, they're all home more than we were. And we're like, oh, that's because we've created this village, this experience. And so I totally went off on a different tangent there. But anyway, for me, that's the first thing that comes up when I think about that difference in those friendships is that just complete, like, I can be just completely myself.
Yeah, there's a real opportunity to have full acceptance, and you believe that you don't have the fear of judgment.
Right.
And
that's huge.
That is very huge. And not just that, but also there's not, and Emily just touched upon this, there's not this like feeling of like you don't have to be high maintenance. You can just, it doesn't matter if you don't talk for 10 weeks. You're not going to be like, why haven't you called me? Or it's like, life is happening and you're still friends the same way you were friends. And if I need to talk to you every day, I can. But if I don't, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you've established a very, very secure attachment.
Yeah.
There you go. Secure attachment. I like that.
Yeah. And with my friends that I've made later in life, I can still talk to them, but it doesn't always feel exactly the same. It just, for some reason, it's not the same. And like Emily said, like we were all at a dinner recently and someone said something and my response, I can be very honest. And I am that type of person that, can be very forward and,
you always have been, Alex.
And assertive and in that way. But I can say something in that group of my opinion of what someone is saying, and they can take it and be like, oh, well, that's not what I think, but well, and then move on. And it doesn't, there's not like, ooh, she's a bitch, or, oh, why'd she say that? Or, oh, it's just like, oh, okay.
It's not complicated. It's actually really simple.
Yes, it's very easy.
Very easy. Yeah. There's something that we believe that we're not going to get judged. We can be our authentic selves. We can actually say, like with Emily saying, I need support. And these are the people that I want to support me because I trust them. Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable with them. I can be super vulnerable and actually say what's really going on and not hide things from them. And you're going to have a much deeper friendship and a much deeper connection with anybody you can be vulnerable with. Is that right? Do you guys agree with that?
Definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're practicing that. You practice that with your hometown friends unpurposely. And it feels amazing because you can get the kind of support that you really need. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Have there been times in your lives when you have needed or asked for or been helped by your friends, your hometown friends specifically, as you had pain and suffering, as we all do as we get older and go through relationships and children and whatever else you've experienced?
All the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is one thing, at least for me, So if I'm experiencing something that, not that I don't want to share with my friends because it's not about embarrassment. It's not about judgment. It's that I don't want my friends to feel badly for me. Okay. So it's a conscious choice that maybe I don't need to share some information until I know that I don't need that, because sometimes having all that attention or someone checking in and you just don't want it at that time, right? Mm-hmm. So, but with a friend like from work who doesn't know all those ins and outs like my hometown friends do, I could say some things to and get support in a different way. Because I'm not worried about that person being worried for me, right? And so I feel like that I experience that with friends who sometimes go through things who don't want to share it. I'm like, why wouldn't they want to share the pain that they're feeling or that they need support? And maybe it's because it's too hard for them to have their friends be in it with them. I don't know. I mean, that's my assumption.
Well, Alex, you had a story. You said you were going through something. I think you said you were going through a breakup, and you said you didn't want to share this with people, but then somebody in your crew kept calling you and didn't just take you at first pass, didn't just leave you alone like you asked them to. You want to tell that story?
Yeah. It wasn't a breakup, but it was a big event that then decided not. It was me and Damien were going to get married and have a big wedding, and we decided not to very late. Okay?
Got it.
And we weren't not together, but there were some very intense things that needed to be figured out. And I did not want to talk about it. I did not. It was too much to tell each friend what was going on. And I had my sister, call my friends and tell them. And, like even Emily's daughter was going to be a flower girl. She had the dress. Like it was a huge thing. Yeah. Jane was going to be the caterer. The venue. It was 6 weeks before the wedding. And, I had my sister like having to send back all the presents that were the registry. And I asked her to tell everyone, Alexandra doesn't want to talk. When she's ready, she will. But Kira called me every single day. It makes me cry because she didn't listen to that. And even though I might not have got on the phone or responded to a text, she just kept doing it. And that's, to me, someone that knows me or knew that I needed that.
Yeah. How did that feel to have someone pay you that kind of attention?
I mean, in the moment, I think I was like, wow. First of all, I was like, how come? It was kind of a martyr. Like, why aren't people calling me? Even though I told them not to, why aren't they? Right? I mean, it's that thing that's like, I don't know if
it's a wish and a fear.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was like, wow, like it felt really good because when I said, when my dad died, after that first week, no one ever talked about it.
Wow.
Like nobody called me, nobody checked in on me,
Wow.
Like it was just he was dead. And then everyone moved on as life moves on, but not for me.
Right.
So having that kind of experience was like, whoa. And so the same way that I'm very intentional about how I'm a parent and what I want to do with my kids differently than what my mom did, I want to be that way with my friends. And so her calling me and me feeling a certain way, I then want to do that with other people.
It's almost like you learned something about being a friend from her.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say that I'm a loyal person, and I think that's the thing that people would say about the words they would describe me as is loyal and generous. Those are the two words that people would say.
Beautiful.
But that specific act of her calling every day made an impact. And I don't talk to Kira every day. but she's one of my very closest friends. I don't even talk to her even once a month.
Well, she paid you the kind of attention that she knew you needed, even if you didn't know you needed it yourself.
Exactly.
And that is a friend who knows you enough to know that you needed, that this was hard on you. And that the truth is that friendships help us navigate things when life is shitty. It doesn't take the pain away.
No.
Never takes the pain away. But it does make it more manageable to know we have people in our corner. Yeah?
Yeah.
And you're very good at that. Calling and checking. Very good at that.
And I like I said, I think it's intentional. I think about those kind of things, very specifically. What would I want someone to do? Or how I want to remember things. I want to check in. I want to be like, oh, how was that for that, your child? And like, how did you even remember that? Because those things I think are important.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me think too about maybe more now. I guess I feel like we're going through life, right? And so we're going through these different stages, and your friendships and the roles they play in your life also continues to change, right? Like I'm thinking about this next phase, which I'm coming up to soon, where I'm not going to have any kids at home, right? And then my friendships their roles, I see them starting to change even more, right? Like, again, I love being with my husband, but I also need other social, right? Like time and experiences. And then I turn to my friends. And so that significance I feel like it's going to change yet again, right? And that role we play with each other. But I think just getting older and as I've gotten older and reflecting more and having these kind of conversations and just thinking more about what kind of friend I want to be and what that looks like, and being more intentional. That's something I have thought about often, is like, what does that look like to be more intentional in all these different ways in your life? But even taking that time to think about what kind of friend I want to be, and also knowing that, thinking about your expectations too. When we talk about this also, that I'm sure you experience this too, like different friends play different roles in your life, right? Like you have a friend you talk to all the time. You have your friend you exercise with. You have your friend where you're going to share something, and if you need them to hear from them the next day, that's not the person. That they're going to hear you, but you may not hear from them for a little bit, but that's because they have other stuff, but that's okay. So you kind of, that feels not necessarily new, but something I think about more of, like, what are those different roles that your friends play in your life, and feeling really okay and good about that.
Yeah. That you're more accepting of people, of how they show up and what they can give, and it does not rolled into one person. Even if we might expect our spouse to be everything, we also understand that they can't be, and our friends can't be every kind of thing we need. That's one of the great things about having a larger social network, is that there is actually more people to meet our needs, or for us to meet their needs in some ways. Do you have any stories, Emily, about feeling supported by hometown friends, or anything that comes to mind?
I think what's sticking out the most is this, even just this past year, my middle daughter, Maddie, she's a senior in high school, and, that we've had to navigate, she's amazing and wonderful, love my baby. And we've had to navigate, some different courses this year, courses that I haven't navigated before. And, turning to Alexandra a lot, and Jenny, and a couple other friends. I don't know. I could have done it without them, but I don't know how exactly, right? Like, I think I had different people in my life say, like, well, are you, what do you need? And are you being taken care of? And I'm like, yeah, I have my friends. I'm good. Right. Again, I have my husband, but it's going back to, like, being that mom and having that connection. So I think more recently, the different navigating parenting pieces and trying to figure that out, really leaning on my closest friends was kind of everything. I mean, it really made it, I feel like we got through it as a family. We're on the other side of a lot of pieces, and that as a result of that village that we've created around us. And my kids also, count on my friends. I mean, honestly, Jenny got Maddie through the threshold of applying for college. Like he had some supplementals that, it was like trying to get to that finish line, and it's harder when it's your parent. And totally. Jenny texted Maddie and said, "We're going to meet at a cafe. I'll see you tomorrow. What time?" Maddie was like, "Okay." And she got her through.
It's amazing. As you say, it truly, you really have a village. Like, we have this trite thing that we say, it takes a village, but if you actually have a village pitching in, then you're not alone in getting our kids the best situations possible, right? Support, community, people other than ourselves.
And I think it's so powerful for our kids. I mean, I think, I find so much joy in that, of our kids to see our friendships and those connections. And it's one thing to talk about it. We don't talk about it. You just do it. You're living it. And for them to grow up with that experience and know that they have that level of support and that modeling of what we were just talking about, like, what does it look like to be a good friend? And I can tell you should call your friend, but they're seeing that,
Yeah.
And I think also it's not just, they get to see the concrete things that friends do for each other, for our kids, right? Oh, can you go pick her up? Can you drop off this? Can you do those kind of things? But then what that means, right? It means you can trust that person. It means that person is important enough to be with my child. It means that whatever, all these different things. And so they get to get these two things of like concrete and emotional or whatever. And that is really amazing. Like, my mom is from New York, so she has friends. She has friends from elementary school still, but
amazing.
They live east, right?
Yes.
So I would hear about them, but I didn't get to physically see it. And my dad was from England and had nobody here. He had a cousin in Marin, but so I didn't see any of that. So it was really, it just happened. And it happened, I think, because we're in Berkeley, because we all felt the same thing. We grew up in a very special time that was very different. Like the no electronics, the having to go, call someone. So those, like, having that kind of experience, I think, is so huge, and that we come back. And the reason I had brought up that Rebecca Walker thing is it's these shared experiences that's so interesting and fun and fascinating and all these things, like, ooh, wow, they lived the same time as us and lived so differently than us. We're still here or wherever, still connected, even if we're not physically in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I asked this question on the survey, and I was going to ask you guys again. It was who do you admire from your hometown? What's the friend that you admire from your hometown? And Alex, I think you said somebody. I think it was Maya.
Yeah, I said
Do you want to
Maya.
say?
Yeah, sure. Maya Brenner, who these are her necklaces.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh shit, you got all the stuff on.
A very, very successful businesswoman. I met Maya at Malcolm X, and we became best friends in the 6th grade. And we had some crazy experiences. And people probably think of me as a bully. Literally, people might watch this and be like, Alexandra was such a bully and she's a mean person and she was a bitch or whatever. I probably was a bitch. But
why, Alex? Why do you think people think that?
Physical fights. Physical. I was known as a person that didn't just get into fights, but could fight. I could protect but I never just got into a fight, like picked on someone. It was always because I was protecting a friend. So I got into many fights over someone bothering Maya or doing something to Maya that I felt was not, it was unjust. I had to protect. I didn't have to, but I felt like I did. I got suspended. Maya would then make herself get suspended. And she always loved making jewelry. That was her thing. But she took a path and became a social. She got her MSW, went to New York, and she never gave up on that dream of making jewelry. And she had some connections that got her kind of moving in the right direction, and was in her garage in her house, moved to LA, and worked and created this very successful business that are all women. It's only women that she employs, and is the most generous person, like so generous. And she never gave up on that dream, and she lives an incredible life. And she's had her hardships, and things have been hard, and but I admire that not giving up on that thing that she used to go to Telegraph and buy beads and create jewelry, right? And now she creates very different kind of jewelry, but I admire that. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And it's incredible to see that, like to see her and just be like, damn. And I'm not on social media, but she has over 100,000 people following. And so people in the world know her, and movie stars wear her jewelry, and,
it's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And she's not some pretentious bitch. She's generous and thoughtful and loving. And, if a friend needs a job, she gives them a job.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's your hometown friend. And you can be completely honest and authentic with them.
100%.
That's amazing.
I don't talk to her often. I go down, and Ursi and I go down twice a year maybe, and hang out with Kira and Maya. Kira and Maya both live in LA, and it's our foursome. We have a picture. Kira also lived in family housing, but the one above Dwight, I can't remember the name of it.
Smythe Fernwall. I lived in that one too.
There's a picture of the four of us, and we recreated we wore the same, we did our hair. It was so funny.
That's awesome.
But it just, not even having to talk to them, same thing. And then from afar, just also that part, just being like, wow, like you really, if you want to do something, you can. And she's a testament to that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's great. I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you admire about Emily? Because this is a friendship that you really chose. You came back to it. It's something that's really special to you. You told me when we saw each other on the street how important Emily was to you, and how you would love to do this interview with her. Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm going to cry. First of all, I'm such a fucking crier, and it's a problem actually in my profession to be this much of a crier. But
it's great on a podcast.
Is it though? I have an ugly crying face. No, first of all, when Emily first had her kids, I had already had my kids. The way that she chose to raise them and discipline them, or especially Bella, it shifted as they got, the more kids, right? But I was always so impressed by that. And
her parenting.
Yeah, her parenting. So that was one thing. I was impressed by her ability to be her true, authentic self, and not have to put on an act, and to be true, and also to be really vulnerable. And, like I said, we cry together over anything, and having a friend like that is really amazing, to know that that's the person. First of all, to have someone that you can just call at any moment, and if they don't answer the phone, I'm going to get a text that says, everything okay? right? So it could just be literally a random call, and I just talked to her yesterday. But if she can't answer it, it's is everything okay, right? So it's her just loyalty and her for your just her being her true self and not wavering from that, and being available and being honest and accepting who I am, and accepting that she asked for my opinion of things because she knows I'm going to be truthful. And so I appreciate that in a friend. And she is one of the friends that really does that and isn't offended because she's asking for my true opinion, and I can tell her that. And so that to me makes it very special to have something like that. And so there's many, many things I appreciate.
Yeah,
but
that's beautiful.
The authenticity, the emotional, aspect, the kindness, all of that. The thoughtfulness. She's very thoughtful. Like when you tell her something, she thinks about it, and then she'll say the next day, "You know me, I had to think about that." Nice. And now I'm thinking about it, and let's talk about that. Even though she'll respond in that moment, she still wants to think about it. So she's very thoughtful.
She's reflective. Yeah, she keeps that going. That's beautiful. And so really, how does that feel, Emily, to have Alex admire you for all those things? Does that feel real?
Yeah, it's thank you, first of all. Which feels like an understatement, but it's a truth to have to sit with someone and hear that. Why is that so? It's almost like it's comfortable but uncomfortable. Like, but it feels really, really good. And I think it feels especially good coming from Alexandra because of the mutual deep admiration. I know I'm assuming it's my turn now.
Yes, it is.
So I think as I'm listening, I think it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the things that you said, I feel the same way. Like there's a mutual, but also one thing I'll start with is Alexandra has an incredible sense of fashion. She's very stylish. I love her, and I don't feel jealous. I love her fashionista, and I often am sending her pictures of like, what do you think about this? I mean, just tonight I was like, this is Maddie's prom dress. What do you think this shoe color will look? And at dinner I said, I had to consult my fashion expert about the shoes, and she agreed. And they said, "Oh, who, Alexandra?" And I said, "Yes, exactly."
That's awesome.
So there's that. It don't mean that's not superficial. Like that's for real.
No, definitely.
But on a deeper level, the next thing is Alexandra is an amazing mom. I mean, just so all in with the parenting and so intentional. I say intentional a lot because that's something I strive to be it's a value I strive for in my life. I feel like I haven't always been, and I don't no regrets, but you think, so just reflecting, being that reflective, right? So I appreciate that intentionality around parenting, and the decisions are so thoughtfully made. And so I do lean in a lot with Alexandra around the parenting advice. And I do appreciate that she is very honest and will tell me if she doesn't agree. And I really appreciate that, because I don't, how helpful is that to like just yes me, no, that's not cute. And no, I don't agree with that. I don't know that I wouldn't do that. And here's why.
And the trust is so high that you're going to take that in.
And not take it personal. Yeah. Like it's not a criticism of my character or who I am, right? It's like we're trying to figure this thing out together. And also, Alexandra's an expert. I mean, this is her field too. So she's bringing in another level, not just like therapy, but bringing in those other aspects that I don't have that same knowledge, right? So I have to continue a little more. And back similarly, like the loyalty is like no other. You know, like I know that I could call Alexandra at 3 a.m. and say, I need you to come over. And she wouldn't say why.
Right.
She would say, okay, let me just put my sneakers on. I'll be right there. Like that.
Wow.
And that's, and I mean that very sincerely. Like that's so, and I feel so lucky to have that, right?
That's rich. I mean, to have someone who will drop everything if you need them, that I don't think money can't buy that.
Well, you can't buy that. You can't buy that. So it's just, you know, that the loyalty, the trust, extremely generous. You know, I admire and appreciate all of that. Like just to have that honest person, and I call her all the time, right? You know, and that's so fun. So I love to be able to do that. And we talk about really deep things and just also random, like Josh is like, why are you talking about that? I'm like, you don't get it. Just don't go away, you know? So crazy little minutia details, you know?
Because everything with a friend like that is good, right? Everything is fair game and everything is interesting when you have a friend with that kind of loyalty, with that kind of deep connection, with that kind of admiration.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because like she's the first person I call when I'm on a walk or when I'm in my car or, you know, like driving to work, or she calls me when she's driving to work, whatever. But it says something in that you talk so often and there's still something to talk about, right? Like
you never run out of things.
Yeah.
And we don't finish.
I know.
We'll finish that later. Yeah. Okay, wait, gotta go. Let's talk about this later.
Here's a really good story. For Julian, all my kids got bar mitzvahed, and my son, his bar mitzvah was kind of like the tail end of COVID, so it wasn't regular. And so it was stressful. And it was, so when we figured out the location and all that, it wasn't kind of like your normal setup. And so my friends, Alexandra and Jenny and Jennifer, I'm sure there was other people, Michelle, Damien, we had the service, just a small group of us at the synagogue. And then we went straight to the like lunch and after small after party. And there was like this crazy tight time frame. Long story short, I walked into the lunch and just burst crying because my friends had set up the entire room. And not just set up, I mean, it was gorgeous with the tablecloths and the decorations, and the food was out, and my friends did that. And
wow.
Alexandra she came and looked at it in advance and like laid it all out. Like they didn't have to do that.
They were there for you when you needed support, physical support, not only emotional support, but actually doing stuff. They were there.
And sometimes, and it also, I had to like go through a process of being okay asking for that and receiving that.
Yes.
And that wasn't necessarily easy because that felt like a big ask.
Yeah.
But they were like, what are you talking about? Like,
it's not even an ask.
We got you.
Yeah. Exactly. And that was for my kid. My kids had that. My kid walked into that.
Yeah. What an amazing feeling to have a group of friends, to have people from your hometown or not, but for you to have these people that insulate you, that give you comfort, that support you, but also support your family, support your children, are there for your children. That's a profound experience in life, to have people to back you up, to have a bubble around you, if you will, a bubble of light, of compassion, of care, and of loyalty. And I think that does describe the hometown friendship situation. Go ahead, Alex.
Add to that is the proximity, the fact that we get to live close to each other.
Yeah.
Because you can have those kind of friendships where you talk on the phone every day and the person could live in Japan, whatever.
Sure.
The fact that we can be in the same place and we can say, let's all go get a drink.
Yeah.
Let's all go to Mexico.
Yeah.
Let's all hang out.
Yeah.
Come to my backyard during COVID.
We did that a
whatever,
lot.
because we're here still. So we get all of that. And that's a hometown friend that gets to stay and continue that.
I don't know what we would have done without our hometown friends during the pandemic and all these things.
Yeah.
So thank you. Shout out to the hometown friends. And shout out Alex and Emily for being on the Hometown Friends podcast. You guys were awesome. It was so great to have this conversation with you. Any last words?
I want to also just appreciate you, Chandler, for like bringing this conversation to light. Because, you talk about bits and pieces of this, but to take a couple hours to really sit down and reflect and honor those friendships, and put some words to it that I hadn't, thought about it in that way. I really appreciate you doing that. And I know that comes from your amazing friendships as well. So thank you for creating the platform and the space.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember you saying in front of Navalon, Alex, come here. We're walking the dogs. You're like, I'm thinking about doing this podcast. And I was like, about what? And you're like, hometown friends. And I was like, but tell me what are you going to do? Like after the stories, then what? Like how? And you're like, well, I'm going to connect it to this and this and this. And at the time I was like, I told you that.
Yeah, you were honest with me.
I was like, I think you need to figure out what the connection is going to be. Because after everybody listens that are in Berkeley, then what? Like, what's the catch? What's the podcast about? But now listening to, and I haven't had the chance to even listen to all of them, but the Reese one, the Jesse, the Jennifer, the Rob, and the Chris one, which I'm halfway through, I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And to see you even from podcast 1 to even podcast 3, how you've evolved and really gotten comfortable with doing this and just being in it and talking to your friends, which is because it's not just we're friends. We are. Right?
And I so value our friendship. And in fact, I don't know, I wouldn't have expected to have you guys as friends when we were way back then. But I'm so grateful to have you as friends and to call you my hometown friends. And I'm so grateful that you took an interest in this and that you gave me honest feedback and challenged me, Alex. That's super valuable. And just both of your smiles, but Emily, your support in that time of the equity circle. And I felt so connected to you and it just keeps building. So I look forward to more building of our friendship in our hometown.
Me too.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Hometown Friends. Every time I release one of these podcasts, I never know what people will think of the interview, but when I listen to this and relive this discussion with these women, I feel an incredible connection to them. Emily and Alexandra really know about the hometown friend experience that I was trying to articulate when I started this podcast. They are so appreciative of the significance of these past and current friendships, and they celebrate the community that they have both created in adulthood, but also know the uniqueness of their youthful friend experience. Although these women charted their own unique paths into adulthood, when the opportunity arose to strike up a friendship, it was instant trust, loyalty, and love. The quality of these types of adult friendships are extremely high because we have the opportunity to both have a wonderful sense of comfort and ease that comes from all the past familiarity, but then we get this great opportunity to choose these friendships based on the more adult interests and share the profound adventures of marriage, parenthood, divorce, empty nesting, and the wisdom of elder years. The closeness that Alex and Emily feel with each other allows them to enjoy sharing all of life's menial things and better handle all of life's challenges. They actively cultivate some of their hometown friendships, but also fully accept the way that close friends from the past are often only sporadically in touch. The loyalty to these friendships is often a unique and significant characteristic of these types of relationships. And if there's a secure attachment to them, you always pick up from where you left off, and there's rarely a worry about the positive feelings of reconnecting. When friendship is effortless, there's a wonderful experience of warmth and connection that allows for playfulness. When this occurs, you can also feel more comfortable to be vulnerable and thus allow for the type of relationship that provides significant support in times of need. If you, like me, are enjoying these podcasts and want to support this project more, please take a moment to subscribe to the Hometown Friends YouTube channel and follow me on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify. And please stay connected with me on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod. And I look forward to sharing more of these interviews with you.